my dear friends Hamid, Akbari, and Azar Khunani, who put this marvelous event together. They're just remarkable people, remarkable. The struggle for nationalization of Iran's oil remains a proud moment in modern Iranian history, and 60 years after the coup, Mossadegh remains the most popular figure in modern Iranian history. A man whose personal integrity has never been questioned, nor his desire to promote the best interests of the Iranian people. The coup was a product of a series of unusual contingencies. If Winston Churchill had not been elected Prime Minister in Britain, if President Truman had chosen to run for his second full term as US President, if the United States had not been in the grip of McCarthyism and the Cold War against communism, and if Stalin had not died in March of 1953, perhaps the United States and Great Britain would not have been able to carry out the coup in Iran with such ease. But there were also a number of internal reasons for why the coup was carried out with relative ease. Throughout his life, Mossadegh remained a steadfast constitutionalist, and he battled to enforce the first democratic constitution of Iran. And it was really this struggle for a more democratic social and political order in Iran that fueled much of the conservative opposition against him. So I want to just talk about a few examples of this. A lot of people, younger people, perhaps are not aware of the fact that Iran 106 years ago had a very modern constitution. The constitutionalists were influenced by the French, the Belgian constitutions, and wrote a constitution that actually ended up being one of the most progressive constitutions of the Middle East. What they managed to do in this constitution was to dramatically reduce the powers of the king. The kings of Iran had, of course, unlimited authority, and it was very common for a prime minister getting into conflict with the king, such as Amir Kabir happened to him, to lose his life. What happened with this new constitution was that the king really became just a ceremonial figure. For example, military officers had to be commissioned with the approval of parliament. He couldn't dissolve the parliament, he couldn't postpone their meetings, he couldn't close it, he couldn't alter or reverse any judicial decisions, he couldn't refuse to sign any laws that the parliament had passed, he couldn't keep a minister that the parliament didn't like, he didn't even have control of the nation's budget. In fact, one of the reasons the harem ended up closing was because the king had no money anymore to fund the harem. And for all of these reasons, the king of the time, Mohammad Ali Shah, the Qajar ruler, hated the new constitutional order and fought it bitterly until he was deposed in 1909. So that's the background out of which Mossadegh comes. The problem was that the constitution had no formal mechanism for enforcing these things, or for removing a king who refused to abide by the constitution. And so this remained a huge problem throughout modern Iranian history. You had a very progressive constitution and really no mechanism for enforcing it. So Mossadegh, throughout his life, tries to abide by the constitution and, in a way, give it a little bit more teeth, if he can. In 1925, at the time when Ataturk has abolished the Sultanate and the Caliphate in Turkey, and Reza Shah in Iran is thinking about becoming a president, but then the clerical authority tells him that he really should become a monarch because they don't want to see an end of monarchy in Iran. One of the people who stands up to Reza Khan and then Reza Shah becomes Mossadegh. He absolutely opposes him. He says this is unacceptable, this is against the constitution. Of course, he doesn't succeed. 25 years later, he fights the son, Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi. In 1949, there's an assassination attempt on the life of the Shah. And the young Shah uses this opportunity, this is long before Mossadegh has become prime minister, uses this opportunity to increase his power. What does he do? He forms a constitutional assembly and right away gives himself the right that the constitutionalists had denied him. That is the right to close the parliament at any time he wishes to do so. Again, Mossadegh gets up, starts arguing with him. There's Mossadegh, there's Qavam, the other prime minister. The two of them are writing to the Shah and saying, this is against the law, this is against the constitution. The Shah keeps complaining, I'm a king and I don't even have the powers that a president in the United States has. And they answer him back and say, Your Honor, Your Majesty, a president has a limited term.
He's a president for 4 years, or maybe for 8 years, and if he's derelict in his duties, well, then he may not be elected, or he may be impeached. You want to be a monarch of a country, lifetime monarch. Of course, we have to be limited in terms of your powers. The Shah refused to accept that. So then we move to 1952. That's the next major battle over constitutional issues between Mossadegh and the Shah. Mossadegh is afraid of a military coup that would remove him. So he introduces a new cabinet and appoints himself both prime minister and minister of war, defense minister. There was a precedent for this. In fact, the king's father had done this previously. So when Mossadegh does this, of course, the Shah keeps complaining, he's taking over everything. Now Mossadegh goes a step further. He says, you know what? It's true that in name you are actually sort of the head of the army, the chief commander of the army. But if you look at the Constitution, you see that you really don't have a right over the nation's budget. Now, how can a king declare a war if he doesn't have the right to the budget of that nation? Because after all, wars involve spending money. And if you don't have the right to spend the nation's money, then really you don't have the right to declare wars either. Shah gets really angry now. He threatens to leave the country. Mossadegh is smart. He says, I tender my resignation. Of course, there's a mass uprising to reinstate Mossadegh. He comes back as prime minister, even stronger. Now he's won the battle over, in a way he had won it by this time, because the British had taken the case to The Hague, the World Court, and the World Court had essentially sided with Iran. So he was bolstered by that and by this mass uprising. And he starts making really big changes in the country. He moves all the corrupt judges of the country. He moves all the retired military officers who had been involved in the repressions of Reza Shah. He reduces the authority of military courts who had tried communist sympathizers. I mean, the communists don't like Mossadegh. They actually hate him. But he's a Democrat, so he still does that. For all of these reasons, the royalists hate him even more. They start opposing him even more. He then turns to the poor and the urban communities. In small towns and villages, he forms small claims courts. He ends feudal dues and corvée, unpaid labor of the peasants. He says that women can be elected to provincial councils. In the cities, he says that women have the right to vote and be elected to union offices. And then he takes 20% of the share of a landlord, gives it to the peasants, a part of their increased income, and also give the rest of it to a village fund for local development. Then he takes a page from the New Deal in the United States and ratifies a comprehensive social security bill for workers, which covers all major illnesses as well as pregnancy, retirement, unemployment, and offers free medical examination. Now, if you think about Obama having a problem today in the 21st century, you can imagine what this meant when Mossadegh did this in the middle of the 20th century. And he makes the rich pay their taxes. So for all of these reasons, now so many sectors of society have turned against him. Abu Qasim al-Kashani, the big cleric, says Mossadegh is interfering in the Quran, he wants to give the right to vote to women, he wants to tax the bazaris and all that. Mossadegh goes a step further. February of 1953, he says the Shah is probably planning a coup, he knew very well. And he says, you no longer have the right to give direct military orders to the top military leaders, and you no longer have the right to negotiate with governments that are hostile to Iran. He then asked the king to turn over Waqf funds, that these are religious endowments from shrine properties, and funds from crown properties to the state. The Shah says, I'm leaving the country. He then sets up a committee. He says, once and for all, we're going to solve this problem. Is this king to rule or he's going to reign? And the committee goes back and forth, and he says, because we've given the Shah lifetime immunity from prosecution, he should not be making the major decisions of the nation. And that decision is final. So in this fight between the Shah is essentially won. Now he wants to ratify new laws. Members of his parliament are leaving in droves. So he calls for a referendum. They call him undemocratic for having called a referendum. And the referendum is not done exactly quite well either. So he has a lot of people opposing him. The royalists are angry with him, particularly because of these new constitutional interpretations that he has made. All of these are really this is a time when the coup is happening. So these internal conflicts paved the way for the Western-backed coup, which was carried out with the help of the Iranian army. And so in the name of democracy and civil liberty, because that's what they're accusing Mossadegh, they're saying he's dictatorial, one of the most progressive prime ministers of Iran was deprived of crucial support in the summer of 1953 and removed from power with the help of Britain and the United States, by the way, the two nations that prided themselves on inventing modern democracy. And let me end by saying just that after 1953, Iranian intellectuals lost their confidence in the integrity of a Western-style democracy because of what the West did and because of what happened inside Iran. They saw that thugs could be rallied and brought onto the streets in the name of grassroots movements, that erstwhile members of the National Front could be bought by foreign agents and encouraged to leave parliament, or to form a faction against the prime minister. They also observed that loyal friends could turn against each other in their hunger for power and use the military process against one another. And of course, they saw that the great powers of the world who tell everyone that they should be democratic can carry out a coup against this great prime minister of Iran and the democratic process. Only Mossadegh's image remained untarnished, turning him into a near mythical figure of 20th century Iran. Thank you very much.